All right, welcome everybody to today's debate or slash discussion, whatever. I build many things as debates. If you don't, some people just are averse to that term. So I heard of James Fodor because of his very critical videos of one capturing Christianity, Cameron Bertuzzi. We'll get to that, and he is pretty critical of positions that I would espouse. James, we're going to get to everything. You guys know I host some of the biggest conversations. I've hosted some of the world's greatest minds. Make sure to subscribe. I put the link in the description for James' channel. I mean, I don't know what else I should have put in. Just go ahead and subscribe. Check it out. He does some of the stuff that might interest you. Before we go any further, James, do you want to briefly introduce yourself? Tell us what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. So I am just commencing a PhD in neuroscience. So I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and I have written a book called Unreasonable Faith, where I examine the arguments of William Lane Craig for Christianity. And on YouTube recently, I've been active in producing some videos critical of various apologetic arguments, and I've also been involved in producing videos on Nathan's channel, so Digital Gnosis, in the Bad Apologetics series, where we do in-depth counter-apologetics analysis. And I am an atheist and a naturalist. Used to be a Mormon, so I spent 20 years in the Mormon church, left that. And yeah, so that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I hope what I say now isn't going to be too offensive to you, but I've noticed that there is different categorizations of what I would call Christians, I guess. And I have this division where the lowest strand I call, not lowest in terms of hierarchy, I just mean the one I would call soup kitchen Christianity. And I notice, and I notice that the atheists that are most critical of it tend to resemble them in some ways. And I would consider you to be like the, what shall I say, the corollary of skinny jeans Christianity. So what I think is annoying about Cameron Bertuzzi, I believe you embody the same kind of annoying stuff, but on the atheist side. Is that offensive to you?
Oh, well, I don't really know what you mean, so I was waiting for you to clarify.
Okay, so what I mean is what some people find amusing about, let's say, Cameron Bertuzzi's snark from the atheist side, I would say that you exhibit the same kind of things, but with the roles reversed. Do you find that annoying?
Oh, I mean, I don't find that annoying. I mean,
Okay, good. I like to be upfront. All right, so you disagree with my version of traditional theism. Now, it doesn't take much to figure out that I'm a Roman Catholic. I'm a former atheist. I guess former naturalist too. But yeah, I'm a former atheist, former ex-Christian. And I disagree with pretty much everything. I do respect Graham Oppy, though. From what I've heard, you've had certain associations with him. Well, I think more than that. He even supervised your book, if I have my information correct again. So I do respect him. I hosted him here. I've hosted him twice, actually, interacted with him multiple times. I think he's a brilliant mind. But I have to say that I disagree with you completely. So would you prefer that I start why I disagree, or would you prefer to start why you think
sure, yeah, you can get started.
Okay. So there's a couple of things to say, and depending on where you fall, there's going to be a bunch of problems. So first of all, naturalism is often undefined, and some critics blast it for it. I usually don't, but my view generally is I let my interlocutor define it, but I just have to make it clear what some of the entailments are. So if you're a very strong naturalist, then I take it that the very existence of things like universals and abstract objects would completely debunk your view. Now, some people want to say that, okay, that's not what we mean by naturalism. What we actually mean is that, okay, abstract objects and universals can exist, but the causal order is strictly natural. And I take it that in that view, then that would be incompatible with something like maybe Aristotelian view of form, matter, essence, Platonic view of essences, stuff like that. And yet more people, I take it people like Dr. Oppy, want to say that, no, what the thesis of naturalism is something like this. There is the causal order. Nothing outside of the causal order affects the causal order. And it's fine if there are things like the universals and abstract objects. That's not a problem. They can be, sorry, there's the cup car. So there can be a bunch of abstract objects out in the universe. And sure, it could be that all the matter we observe is a composite of form and matter, and there could be substances, but there isn't, okay, anything outside of this causal order that interacts with it. So there is no God that interacts with it. There is no sustaining cause. There is no angelic stuff, nothing like that. There's this causal order. So, I mean, those are the ones. And I think all of those naturalisms, as naturalistic theses, as good as they are simply not adequate to explain the world around us. And I take this for a couple of reasons. First of all, I will simply assume that you don't advocate for anything like the first one, because on that view, simple arguments and for abstract objects would be enough to say that your naturalism can. Do you want to say something?
So I'm getting a bit lost in terms of when you mean the first one. So which
Okay, so
first one did you mean?
yeah. So I listed different things that people might mean by naturalism. Some people might take an extremely monistic view where literally all that exists is that which is material. And on that view, I take it that simple existence of abstract objects would be a counterexample. Now, I'll just assume that that's not what you mean by naturalism. What you mean by naturalism is something
Well,
like, yeah, what you mean by naturalism is something like Graham Oppy means, which is that there is a causal order, independent of whether nominalism is true or Platonism, and nothing outside of it interacts with the causal order. So do you want to clarify that, or should I just proceed?
well, yeah. I mean, I think I'm broadly similar to Graham Oppy here, although I
Okay.
differ on some specifics. But I don't see how abstract objects would be a counterexample to naturalism, because
Well, not to not
you
yeah, not to naturalism simpliciter, but there are certain versions of naturalism which would stipulate strict adherence to monism, and on that view, independent existence of abstract objects would be a counterexample. But again, like I said, I have no reason to think that this is the kind of naturalism you hold to. I mean, I assume that the kind of naturalism you hold to is simply that, independent of whether abstract objects exist or not, what we have is a causal order, and nothing interacts with that causal order. And abstractions are causally inert, so that's a separate issue. Am I wrong?
sure.
Okay, so that's Graham Oppy's view, and I've discussed that. Okay, good. But again, I think that there are smart people that hold to this, and I've said before, I exhibit I have big respect for Oppy. It's so great that even everyone I've critiqued, I haven't brought myself to critique him, but I think it fails ultimately, and there are several reasons for this. First of all, now again, I understand that your view will be Bayesian. Am I pronouncing that word correctly? Bayesian. But we'll get to that when we get to that. So first of all, I would like to offer several reasons why we think we should reject naturalism, and two, positively accept theism. So I won't just be arguing against naturalism. I will be defending both. I will be arguing not just naturalism is false and therefore mine is true. I'll be arguing there's good reasons to reject naturalism, but there is even better reasons to accept theism. So let's start. I first of all think that naturalism has not offered a good account for the philosophy of mind, or psychology, as I like to call it, because in our terms, psychology is broader than simply study of behavior. What psychology is study of the philosophy of mind, etc. I'm sure you're familiar with the field, so you'll have plenty to say there. I think that the best evidence that we have from understanding is that psychology, even though intimately connected with the corporeal, has to contain an element that is not reducible to the corporeal. Multiple reasons for this have been offered traditionally. I would have to, I guess, go with not to get too clear, but I'm sure you will want to zoom in on this one with traditional Aquinas's arguments, which is that the intellect is able to abstract and everything corporeal has to deal with particulars. And yeah, we will discuss that later. Secondly, I think that naturalism also, at best, offers some kind of, leads us to some kind of indifference, because all the supposed Bayesian examples that are offered for naturalism can have counterexamples. And that's when we have the idea, for example, tragedy, that wouldn't be expected on theism, but would be accepted on naturalism. We can just reverse that and offer some kind of natural teleology and goodness, and thus we would get a Bayesian argument that's a counter argument. So all that they do is basically cancel each other out at best. Though I would argue even that is kind of optimistic for the naturalist. And finally, I do think that there is good reasons to think that a God exists. And I'm finishing up now. I think that you've critiqued what people call the kalam. Full confession, I hate the word kalam. I call it the Islamic cosmological argument. But I do think the best version of it, and I don't think, with all due respect, that Craig gives the best version of it. The best version of it, on my view, does work. And I do think that there is a good reason to support that. Additionally, I would add that there is multiple reasons to think that other traditional cosmological arguments work. I will throw a couple out. We can discuss them. I think the Leibnizian argument works. even on the Bayesian view, which rejects arguments as the primary ways of convincing, as I believe you've argued following Graham Uppy, I still do think that the existence of such arguments would lend credence. So I think any view you take, this would be certain evidence. For theism, I also think that the modal ontological argument works. There is many more, but I wouldn't want to take too much space, so I will throw out those three that I'm convinced do work. Go ahead. Why don't you take over? You can introduce what you will be defending or respond to me. You can start with whatever.
Sure. Well, I think the basic reason why I'm a naturalist is because I don't think that I was going to say theism, but actually anything beyond naturalism, which would include theism, so any such concepts or entities are necessary for any of our best scientific theories. And by scientific theories, I mean like science broadly construed. So this would include, social sciences and I guess even kind of philosophy, although we could argue about that. But so basically, any of our best theories for understanding the world, I don't think they require us to postulate anything beyond the natural order. And so I think that postulating anything beyond the natural order is unnecessary and explanatorily unnecessary, and therefore it could just be done away with. I think that is sort of a meta argument for naturalism. Now, obviously, in and of itself, that's just an assertion, right? So you have to look at that in a case-by-case basis in terms of, well, what are the proposed explanatory benefits of postulating things beyond the natural order, and examine those individually. And I think when you do that, you find that, or at least I find, that there's no value in postulating such things. Now, I also think that there are positive arguments against various forms of theism, but I think that those are sort of secondary to what I call the meta argument. But if you like, we could start by talking about what you had to say about philosophy of mind, because that would be an example of the sort of thing where I don't think it's necessary to postulate anything beyond the natural order. So
I call it psychology, but philosophy of mind is fine.
Yeah, sure.
Psychology is all encompassing. So it encompasses neuroscience, it encompasses philosophy of mind. I don't divide philosophy and science. I think they're part of the same thing. Some people do. I don't.
Cool.
But that's fine. Okay, so I do think that neuroscience is a worthwhile science, but I think that the presupposition of most neuroscientists is simply wrong. They take a metaphysical thesis to be a conclusion of the physical, which I would contest is not the case. So the mind monism or some kind of mind naturalism is not a physical thesis. It's a metaphysical thesis. And of course, I think that metaphysics and physics interact all the time. And of course, metaphysics is what follows physics. It has to depend on the natural sciences, but it still is something that comes after the sciences, not something that's reached during the sciences. So I would argue that there is good reasons to think that in the psychology, we have good reasons to think that there is an immaterial aspect that interacts with the causal order. And this would, again, not be something abstract, which I believe you've granted could exist, but something concrete because it interacts and causes things. And, well, first of all, I would cite, I guess this is the absence of evidence stuff, but I'll just make a case. First is that I don't believe that any monistic case for psychology has succeeded. Now, this, again, doesn't have to be an argument, but I do think it's some kind of evidence. Secondly, I think there are good reasons to think that the mind is essentially has immaterial aspects. And one I've offered is that the mind can conceptualize incorporeal things that can't be accessed through either imagination or the senses. Now, the examples of those are our ability to conceptualize triangularity, goodness, wisdom, right? You cannot imagine triangularity because anything you will imagine will be a particular triangle. You can represent it in your mind, but it won't be triangularity. You can conceptualize it. Now, we don't have to have too many Thomistic or Aristotelian commitments because that's going off the board. Secondly, I would argue that we do have determinate conceptual content. And I don't think that anything material can have determinate conceptual content because due to Wittgensteinian considerations, I believe that the paradox, the so-called rule-following paradox, and this is an argument developed by James Ross. It's not me. You guys can just look it up. I'm just standing on the shoulder of giants. Do illustrate that we have good reasons to suspect the view. Now, of course, I don't expect you to respond all of these arguments. Maybe you haven't read them before. That's totally fine. But you offer me what reason you think that supports the thesis that monism about psychology is correct. Go.
So this would be an instance, as I said, of what I've called the meta argument for naturalism, which is the explanatory inadequacy of any non-natural theories. So the question would be, what additional? Well, so the starting point for this is, I suppose you could say, a rejection of idealism, and by that I just mean that pretty much
Yeah.
everyone who's not an idealist accepts that the material physical world exists.
Yes.
Which I would include you as well.
Yeah.
So on that basis, then the question is, do we need to postulate anything beyond the material physical world in order to account for our experience and the things we observe in the world? So the answer I give to that is no. And so the question then is, in particular domains, do we find examples of phenomena that require us to postulate something beyond the physical? And again, my answer to that, obviously in the case of philosophy of mind or psychology, is no. So then the question would be, well, what are the sorts of things that people have offered as requiring something beyond the natural order? And you've mentioned a couple of them. So one would be intentionality or determinacy of mental content. Another one is consciousness. I don't think you mentioned that there, but that's one that typically is mentioned. I can't remember what else you referred to.
Yeah, so just to clarify something, though, I want to jump in. I do agree with explanatory virtues, but I think you're perhaps being too quick here. The explanatory virtue isn't just about a theory that offers less. What matters is how much of the data it accounts for. So I'm very happy to concede that naturalism could be making less assumptions, but as long as it accounts less for the data we have, I do think that it's not explanatorily virtuous. Now, the reason why I avoided some of the traditional proofs, because I don't want to argue for something called substance dualism, because I think that it's misguided, though I respect those who hold to it. I argue what's known as hylomorphic dualism. Again, these are all unrelated topics, so I'm not going to go into clarifying them. What I need to show is that there is good reason to think that the mind has something immaterial for us to think, and whether somebody wants to go deeper into that, they can do that. I'm happy to tell people about it. So, again, what I think the first is, this is the traditional one. This is offered by Aquinas in Summa Theologia. I hope I have it over there. So, the one this is offered, and this is a simplistic version. Again, Summa is supposed to be a summary. Okay. And this is the one that the intellect, again, remember, on Aristotelian views, the intellect is that part of the mind that can conceptualize abstractions. Not only the one that feels pain, but that can think about abstractions. The intellect can conceptualize non-corporeal or things that are sans corporeal. So I can conceptualize triangular things through my senses. I can see a triangle. I can imagine a triangle. But the intellect can conceptualize that which cannot be reduced to corporeal, which is triangularity. Now, I can be accused of begging the question. Aren't you saying that couldn't be? But all that's required is analysis. The one that I would be imagining would be a particular. All the senses interact with our particulars. The senses have no interaction with, whether you want to call them mental or, again, I don't want you to take any position on it. I take my position on moderate realism. You could be a Platonist, nominalist, whatever. One thing we could say is that abstract objects, whatever else they are not material. They could be fictional. I disagree with that. You can have that view. They could be, there could be a realm of them. I disagree with that. Moderate realism could be true. Again, what I would agree with, I don't want anybody to commit to that. What I'm saying is this data is not accounted for by naturalism. And whether you want to use the words of explanatorily virtuous or whatever, this is what it comes down to. That's my argument number one. And second would be the intentionality one that you're familiar with, that James Ross made. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So again, the argument is not just that naturalism is simpler or more parsimonious. It's also that it's explanatorily adequate. So that's the relevant criteria as well. So then we have to examine postulated examples of the explanatory inadequacy of naturalism and see whether they hold up. At least that's how I think about this. And so you've offered two examples, although that they seem fairly similar to me. But let's think about the first one, the triangle example that you give. So I'm a little bit unclear what is. So let me try to explain what you've said. So you've said that we can conceptualize the triangularity.
The intellect can conceptualize incorporeal abstractions.
Yes. But we can't. The senses don't give us any examples of incorporeal abstractions.
Well, they don't give us the senses can't derive abstractions. They can derive the particulars in which the abstractions subsist. So they
we don't observe abstractions. We observe particulars.
Exactly, because observation is something that's tied to the senses.
Okay, so the argument is we can conceptualize of abstractions, but we can't
We
perceive
can't
them.
imagine them. We cannot perceive them because imagination, perception have to do with the senses. So there must be something that's doing that, which is not reducible to the senses. This is the argument that Aquinas gives.
Okay, so I'll just accept that for the time being. But what's the argument for that being immaterial? That's where I'm lost.
Yeah. So we're saying that that which is reducible to material has to, in principle, conform to those things that are corporeal. And I'm blabbering here, but I'll explain this in a minute.
I mean, that's just two ways of saying the same thing.
Yeah. So let's try to put this a little bit.
So why
better.
does our faculty of conceptualizing of the abstract have to be immaterial? I don't see the argument for that.
Well, okay. There's multiple ways to explain. I'm just going to throw this out, but again, this is another call, right? Just to make it clear, Aquinas operates under the view that when we conceptualize abstractions in our intellect, we actually take the form of that which is conceptualized without taking on the matter. Now, of course, you would reject something like this, but then I would actually ask you, what you take in virtue of what are we correct to conceptualize abstractions? In virtue of what are we referring to an abstraction? Because again, conceptualization has nothing to do with imaginations. So we're not imagining the same shape. So in virtue of what are we not equivocating when we're saying you're conceptualizing of triangularity, when we have no way to account for that? Because triangularity is a word that has a referent, a fixed referent. That is, triangularity refers to triangularity, the disquotational principle of truth. I want to ask you, you're conceptualizing something, and I would say that is our intellect taking on the form of triangularity. Okay, and that's in virtue of what it can be said to be conceptualizing of triangularity. Now, in your view, what would it be, okay, that you would be conceptualizing in virtue of what it is not equivocation to say you're conceptualizing triangularity?
But this doesn't seem to me to be a question about the mind. This seems to be a question about the ontological status of abstract objects, because you're asking me for the truth. You're asking me for the truth maker of these statements, right? You say in virtue of what am I correct in conceptualizing? It's like what am I referring to? That's not a mental question. That's a question about the status of abstract objects.
Well, not really, because abstract objects you could be a nominalist and make the same
Well,
argument.
I am a nominalist, right? So I'm going to tell a different story. I don't think they have a referent in the sort of external world. So I'm going to tell a different story about that.
Okay, that's fine.
Than you would accept.
Okay, that's fine. But you could still, I mean, if you're committed to fictionalism, which I take you are committed to.
Something like that. Yeah, okay, we'll go with that.
Okay, if you're a fictionalist, and for those that don't know, it just says that abstract objects exist in the fictional world. But in the fictional world, there's still a referent to number 7, right? So if you have
sure.
Okay, so it's the same problem. In virtue of what are you not equivocating when you're saying you're conceptualizing triangularity, when you have absolutely no connection between that which is triangular and that which you are conceptualizing?
Why is there no connection? Right.
Well, I'm asking you to explain it. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, I take it that we derive these abstract concepts through a process called psychological abstraction, where basically we observe many examples of, let's say, things that particulars that we would regard as triangular, although we're imposing that concept, right? But I have to have a word for describing them, right? So we observe particulars and we abstract this aspect of them of having 3 sides, right? And their internal angles summing to 180 degrees and so forth. And I mean, this is obviously something that developed historically over long periods of time where people develop these concepts, but we abstract these aspects of them and then develop a language for describing them. And then when people are taught this, then they're able to deploy that concept and through use of language, use concepts that then appeal to the same concept in someone else's head that allow them to refer to the same aspects of particulars that exist in the world. So I don't think there's any sort of Platonic realm of triangulars or anything that exist. So that's I don't think that's what's being referred to.
Me
but it's the same abstraction.
Yep. I don't believe in
Now, if you push, I guess that what I would say is that the specific mental content that undergirds the abstraction in each person's head, like in their mind, will be different, right? Because each person's brain is not precisely the same.
So that's what.
So if that's your worry, that doesn't really bother me, because that just means that the mental substrate is subtly different.
Yeah, so there's a problem there. Right?
It's sufficiently similar for us to deploy the concept, right? So I don't really see what the problem is supposed to be. So
there's a problem, right? The first one is, again, I don't want to go into too much because I want to move on to what I call the Islamic cosmological argument, the kalam, and I don't want to take like 1 hour talking about the mind. So I'm going to wrap it up.
Oh, sure. It's just the first one you mentioned, so I thought it would be the place to
that's
start.
fine. the main one I wanted to discuss was, but we're going to dwell on this. So, two things. First, I think your account is inadequate. I don't expect you to respond because I think that you mentioned that the way we develop abstractions is through observation of the senses. I would say that's completely wrong because most of the things, or many of the things that we conceptualize, we've never observed. If I were to start talking about chiliagons, and which you may have not heard before, you may have heard, I don't know, or many of the people in the audience, I'm convinced, would have never heard of that, is a thousand-sided shape. There is no way to conceptualize it. No one has ever seen it in reality, and it is indistinguishable from a circle when seen in most drawings. So nothing from the senses could abstract chiliagonness.
Yeah, but I'm not sure the notion of psychological abstraction. I believe Hume talked about this, but the idea of psychological abstraction is not simply that you observe a bunch of things and then you recognize what those have in common. I mean, that is a way that you can do it. That's a simple starting point for triangles. Obviously, that doesn't work for chiliagons or whatever.
Yeah.
But the idea there is then you can abstract from abstractions that you already have. So I have a notion of a triangle and a square, 3-sided shape, 4-sided shape, pentagon, 5-sided shape. I can then extrapolate that, abstract that into an arbitrarily many-sided shape, even if I haven't observed any. This is just using faculties of reason. I don't actually see why this requires anything beyond the material.
Okay, also, I wasn't. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. That's fine.
Well, the second part to that question was that you've asked me for my account, and I just sketched a very brief one.
Yeah, it's fine. I wasn't expecting you to respond.
No, that's fine. It's just that then the next question is, suppose that my account is not entirely adequate, which I suspect it won't be because, science is developing.
Mine isn't either. I don't believe that mine is.
Yeah, well, just the point I'm making there is I would take it that evidence for supernaturalism or theism would be something along the lines of good accounts for things in our world, which are clearly better than anything that naturalism can develop. So even if a naturalist account isn't fully adequate, that in itself wouldn't be sufficient to establish. I acknowledge. We would need a better account that appeals to things that the naturalist can't. So that would be then the challenge.
I fully acknowledge that before. Okay, so I wanted to move on to the next thing you said. Again, I don't want to go too much on this. Next thing you said is that the psychological state will be different in those two things, conceptualizing the triangularity. And this is, I think, another problem for your side. Again, I won't expect you to go too deeply into this because the psychology is hard, a lot of unsolved problems. So, I'll be more hard pressing when we get to the Kalam because I think you should have known about that, but this is fine. But I just want to get to and say that there is a problem there. And this is the problem that James Ross brings up. James Ross is, I guess, someone that Ed Phaser cites, and I know for a fact that you've interacted with the works of Dr. Edward Phaser.
A small amount.
Well, okay, but then some of the people you've associated with. So, with Edward Phaser, you've interacted. So there is good reason for us to think that there is cases where the mental content, strictly on a naturalistic view, should be similar, but yet differences are noticed. And for this, there's the famous illustration that Kripke brings. Again, I will shamelessly plug myself. I hosted Kripke on the show, the greatest living philosopher, so I win. But
I saw you got him on. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I won. No, so here is what the example is. And again, he develops this more better in this book. So let's take people who use language rules. This actually comes from Wittgenstein, in fact, originally. Kripke simply develops it. It's not a novel idea. It comes from Wittgenstein. And the view is that, let's say you have several things for which some rules are similar. So the classical thing is, let's say that I use the symbol plus and you use the symbol plus. But when I use the symbol plus, I use the symbol plus to refer to the same functions, except when we're adding something over, over 5.
I've heard this sort of argument.
Yeah. So over 5. So let's say you add 5 plus 5, you get 10. Let's say you add 6 plus 6, you get 12. But my rule says that anything that I add above, let's say 5, I have to automatically get 1, and I call this quaddition. So now let's say that you perform the rule of addition, 6 plus 6, and on the rules of addition, you get 12. Now, let's say I'm supposed to perform quaddition, which is what I've always been used to, which is 6 plus 6, quus 1, because anything above 5 automatically is 1. But I mistakenly calculate and get to 12. Now, on a physical level, we've performed the same operation. Yet in virtue of my intentions and commitments, I am wrong and you are right. I am wrong to quad 6 plus 6 and get 12 because I should have gotten 1. You should have gotten 12. So on a physical level, there would have to be no difference in the case of mental content because we're conceptualizing 12, 12, 6 plus 6, 6 plus 6, same operation. But there is a big difference because I'm getting the wrong answer, you're getting the right answer. So this is the argument, the meat of the argument is that there must be something that is not being captured purely by the material parts of the brain. Again, I'm willing to let you respond, but I have to move on after this one.
Sure. So it's been a while since I read about
That's
the
fine, yeah.
quotition arguments. I don't recall it supposed to being an argument against materialism, but I mean that's fine. I'll have to check that.
It's rarely used. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. All I would have to say is that I mean I don't really see how it is that what you said is an argument against materialism. If someone if someone understood quaddition instead of addition, then there's going to be, at least in my understanding, a mental substrate which ultimately bottoms out in terms of differences in their brain, that in terms of their conceptualization of that process. So basically there's going to be a physical difference somewhere.
Right. With that, I have to move on. I love philosophy, psychology, but we need to move on to them.
Oh, sure.
Okay. All right. So I will simply display my version of the Kalam, and mine has 27 premises. So sorry for those of you guys that should have prepared your brain. So, anyways, I understand that you're a critic of this argument, and
well, I've never seen a version of the Kalam with 27 premises, so perhaps this one would be better. But yeah, I don't think the Kalam is a very good argument.
It's pretty much the same. It's just very well developed. I just developed it against those annoying atheists who tell me Kalam doesn't get you to a god; it just gets you to some abstraction. I said, you know what? Fuck you. Here it is.
That's true though, because Craig always points out that that's what it does.
Well, yeah, I disagree, but that's fine. We don't need to go into it. Right. So I'm going to just share my screen, and we're simply going to dwell on the first 3 steps. And I'm interested in what your objection is. And I'm just full confession, I know you've done so much work. I just haven't seen you give. Oh, sorry, I accidentally shared the wrong window. Let me see here. How do I? Okay, there we go. All right. So I've never actually seen an argument that would warrant rejection. Certainly none that would be answer to my supporting for the Islamic cosmological argument. I hate the word kalam. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. So let's start with the first 3. We don't need to go anywhere else. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Do you accept this principle?
Ooh. Well, in my book, I talk a lot at length about what Craig means when he says everything begins to exist, because he has a particular notion of philosophy of time in mind when he talks about beginning to exist. I don't know if you think. Well, let me just ask: do you think that is important? Beginning to exist? Do you understand that in a tense sense, or does that matter?
Well, not that much to me. I would say that I am a presentist, but I do think that Kalam works on P theory. But I mean, you go ahead and let me hear your objection, and if it comes in, it comes in. Whatever.
Well, it's just an issue of clarification. So I think if the Kalam does depend on the tensed theory of time, then that weakens it because it has to establish that. But if you don't think that or don't think that's important, then we need.
I don't think it's dependent on it. No, I do think I hold to the presentism, but I don't believe that Kalam is dependent.
That's okay. Again, the reason I say because Craig does think that it's dependent on it, so for him it's important. All right, so let's put that to the side for the moment. So everything that begins to exist has a cause. I would interpret that as everything that is finitely extended in the before then direction has a cause. I don't know if that's true. I think it might be true.
Yeah, just a quick clarification though, for you and the audience, because I think that this isn't sufficiently defined. We're talking about a cause. We mean an efficient cause. Just as a refresher to the audience, Aristotle introduced 4 causes. I don't need to go into that, but an efficient cause is that which is most directly responsible. It's an agent, but agent in this doesn't mean it has a mind. It's simply a thing that acts concretely that is most responsible for the motion that it's put into. So a simple example, the efficient cause of a table are the factory workers, so on and so forth. So this is what we're talking about here. Okay, now I take it to be a very important, I think that it's really hard to deny this principle for multiple reasons, but I'm going to let you go because if you're not going to challenge it, then I have no reason to go further. But go ahead.
Well, I don't. So I'm not nearly as convinced about this premise as you are, and also there's going to be some differences here because I don't buy into Aristotelian metaphysics, so I don't even know about the concept of an efficient cause. I have a particular set of views about what causation might be.
Yeah, you don't have to accept Aristotelian views to accept efficient causation.
Well, the reason I mention that is because I understand you don't have to accept that particular understanding, but if I accept a different understanding of causation, then premise 1 may be significantly less plausible than it is to you.
I'm willing to hear it out.
So again, I think premise one is plausible, but I'm not necessarily convinced about it. And
okay, fine. Let's change it up. Do you believe that if the universe began to exist, it had a cause?
If the universe began to exist, then it had a cause. I think probably not, but it might have. I don't know.
Sorry?
Maybe I'm 2/3 no, 1/3 yes.
Okay, so you would lean towards saying if the universe began to exist, it had no cause.
Yes.
So you would argue.
Weakly lean, yes.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part.
I just said weakly lean. So
Weakly
two-thirds,
lean.
1/3.
Okay, that's
maybe.
fine. But just to make it clear, you lean towards the universe literally coming from nothing.
No, because I don't accept that is the same thing as having no cause.
Yeah, so
Oppie challenged you on this as well in his discussion, so I would just refer to what he said about that.
I know, but I will definitely. I mean, Oppie and I've hosted a multiple times.
No, I'm just saying it's.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing about that as to why I agree with the first, but not the second.
Yeah, so like what I take it to be is, again, you don't have to buy into Aristotelian notions. This is a broadly view that there is multiple ways a cause can be a cause. Modern world rejects the formal cause and the final cause. Again, I disagree with that, but we don't need to. Almost everybody accepts the notion of material causes and efficient causes. And again, efficient causes, the direct cause, material is what it's made out of. There is no commitment necessary. All that's necessary is this one. So now, in my view, if the universe began to exist, there wasn't a material cause, correct? Because the universe is that which contains matter. So if it began to exist, then there couldn't be a material cause to it, right?
Yeah, maybe. It depends how you define universe. There are different ways of doing
I have
that.
a problem there because, and I told you I would press you a little bit on the Kalam because you've had a lot of time to prepare for this. So let me make this clear. The universe is space-time. I create time-space here, but universe is space-time. I don't want to. Yeah, I'm not going into this weird rabbit hole of the universe as cosmos, all that exists. No, I'm clear. The universe has a very clear definition in science. This is the definition that Craig articulates. I know this, and the definition that most defenders of the Islamic cosmological argument have defended. So I'm not open to this ambiguity. The universe represents space-time, which includes, as its main components, matter and energy. Okay. Now,
so I disagree with you there, right? Because that's why I mentioned this. Because if you define the universe as all of material reality, then obviously it can't have had a material cause. If you define it as all of space-time, then it could have had, because there are conceptions of materiality that are not part of space-time.
Okay, so are you saying that matter is not a temporal thing necessarily?
You've got to be really careful here, because we get into sort of fundamental physics here. If by matter you mean like baryonic matter, the ordinary kind we interact with, then of course that is temporal. But if by that you just mean some sort of quantum field, then no, I don't think that necessarily has to be part of space-time. And I think that we're really waiting on a theory of quantum gravity to be the final answer to that. But I think that there are plausible models in which there are essentially quantum fields that operate outside of classical spacetime, or I guess relativistic spacetime. And those would be material, but not part of spacetime.
All right, so let's switch it up a little bit. The universe had no efficient cause then. Like, you would agree that if the universe began to exist on your view, there was no efficient cause.
Well, actually, what I was just saying there is that it may have had a material cause, depending on whether you find it as all materiality or space-time. In terms of efficient causation, just to answer that question, I mean, I tend to think that efficient causes and material causes are sort of the same thing. Or
no, material cause is what a thing could consist.
No, I know that under Aristotelian theory that they're different. But
Senator, but let me explain what I mean. Right, what I mean by an efficient cause is something that's directly responsible for bringing the universe into existence. So when you said that you're not convinced, that means that you believe, at least 2/3 weekly, that the universe arose without anything influencing that.
Although arose, I'm not necessarily comfortable with that term, because when we say arose, I would understand that to mean having the first moment of space-time, let's say, or the earliest temporal moment of space-time. So the earliest temporal moment of space-time plausibly had no cause. And I understand cause to be a relation between spatiotemporal events, or probably a relation between spatiotemporal events.
That's question begging. I apologize. But I mean, if you're saying that causes can't be atemporal, then you're just begging the question against the...
I'm not begging the question, because you asked me whether I agree with this premise or not. I'm explaining why I disagree with it. That isn't question begging.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I apologize. So okay, so let's clarify something. I believe that even though there wouldn't be anything prior to the universe temporally, there would be something prior to the universe logically, and you believe this, right?
I don't know what you mean by logically prior. I don't think that that really means anything. The universe is not an abstract object, and I think that that's where logic applies to logical derivations. It
No,
doesn't. There's no logical relation of concrete entities. At least I don't
no,
believe that there is.
yeah, but you do believe that something existed sans the universe, right? If the universe began to exist,
Is all space time.
space
Plausibly,
time.
yes.
Okay, so that's what I would consider to be logically prior. But
Okay, sure. We'll call it that then.
yeah, but it's fine. If somebody doesn't like the term, that's fine. It's maybe a loaded term. Okay, so now I'm asking. Okay, so the universe arose from this state. Okay, let's just say, because we're going to get to whether the universe began to exist. I'm more than fine to get to that, but I just want to dwell on this a little bit. Okay, here's the fact. What is it that makes a difference between the universe? So in this field, you're saying that the universe could have arisen or not have arisen, correct?
Ooh, well, that's a different question. Let's just say, let's just say yes
Okay,
for the
let's say
sake of
yeah.
argument.
Okay,
I
good.
actually don't know, but let's just go with yes.
Okay, yeah, it could have or could not have arisen. Now the question, of course, is what is it that makes difference, right? What is that that thing? I mean, is it a correct question for us to ask what is it that makes the difference for the universe arising rather than not arising? And more importantly, the question is going to be if there is that thing which makes a difference, in what way is that not an efficient cause of the universe?
Right. Well, I think that the way you define efficient cause is just the thing that makes the difference. Is that correct?
Well,
To something happening or not happening?
I mean, I am willing to say that there could be something that makes a difference isn't an efficient cause, but I would love to hear your account of it.
Sorry, what? Could you say that again?
I am willing to accept that there could be something that makes a difference,
Oh,
and
right.
it's not
Okay.
an
Yes.
efficient cause, but I would like to hear an account of how it's
No,
different.
I don't have an account of it, right? Well, let me explain how I think about it. So I have a particular understanding of causation, which would preclude there being a cause that originates outside of space time. So that means that if anything did make the difference in terms of the universe coming to existence or not coming into existence, then it couldn't be a cause. Now, perhaps it could still be something else, right? Because that's an analysis of the notion of causation. That there still might be something that isn't cause, but is the thing that made the universe come into being. But I just don't have any particular. I think that there's no way we could know that.
Yeah, the word
I'm
cause.
just agnostic about that.
Yeah, so like the thing is, you can be agnostic, but I'm here to offer reasons why it's not reasonable for a person to be an agnostic. No offense to you personally.
Well, premise one doesn't convince me of that because I have a particular understanding of causation. Now,
Well,
maybe you could replace the word cause with something else.
Yeah, we scrapped the premise one, remember, to not go into that, and we said, if the universe began to exist, do you believe it had a cause? That's what I asked, and you said, well, you lean towards that there. And again, I will dwell a couple of minutes on this because we have to move on, but I just want to make it clear that I think that there is good reason to accept that it was a cause, because again, the question is going to be, what is it that makes the difference? Let's say, sans the universe could have come out into being or not, and this is what philosophers call possible worlds. I'm sure you're familiar. My audience should be familiar.
Yeah.
So in some possible world, the universe arises. In some possible world, it doesn't. You could be a necessitarian, but I mean, that's a different rabbit hole. So there is two possible worlds. One possible world, the universe begins to exist. The other doesn't. What is it ultimately that accounts for it? There's this X. Now,
well, you're assuming that there's an X. I don't know that there is. There might be. I just have no idea how we could know that.
Yeah, that's just to posit a brute fact, which is just to betray reason, in my view.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, we're going to disagree about I'm a pretty strong empiricist, right? I think that we have no business
I'm an
expecting
empiricist too. Yeah, I'm an empiricist too.
Well, interesting. I'm not sure how we can
All
think we have any.
Aristotelians are empiricists.
Well, I guess a different form. I don't know how we can have any business knowing about whether there has to be something that made the difference as to whether the universe came into being or not. That's so far outside of anything that we can know, in my opinion.
Okay,
at least currently.
Okay, is it is it a fair question to ask? What is it that made the difference? Do you think that's a fair question to ask?
Oh, I think it's a fair question.
Okay,
there's a difference between a fair question and expecting an answer.
Okay. So that's a fair question to ask. Now, I'm asking you, do you think that the two possibilities, which is it either something did make a difference or not, that's true dichotomy, right?
Yeah, sure, I'm happy with that. I
So
just think we don't know. Maybe.
okay, yeah, but that's a true dichotomy, regardless of whether one of these knows. So
Yeah.
we're arguing that committing to the view of we don't there was no cause is problematic. The first one is, of course,
Oh, I think committing to either of those, either there was a difference maker or there wasn't, is problematic. So if you're going to phrase it that way, I would say I just really have no idea. If you're going to phrase it in terms of causation, I would say I lean that there probably wasn't. Why? Because I have a particular notion of causation, which
okay,
I
that's
haven't
fine.
defended
That's
here,
fine.
but that's why I'm taking issue with
Okay,
cause,
that's
just to
fine. So
clarify.
we don't want to mention the cause. I'm asking, what
Yeah.
is it that made the difference? So I'm saying that whatever did
I
make.
I don't know that there was anything that made a difference. And
Okay,
if there
then
was, I have
okay,
no idea what it might have
okay,
looked
then
like.
okay, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. So now I'm asking, you don't know if there was something that made a difference, but I'm asking, it's a fair question to ask what it was that made the difference. Now, there's two possibilities. One is that nothing made the difference, which simply would ask for a question of why is it that the universe arose rather than not arose,
Yeah,
not
that's a fair
arise.
question to ask. There may
That's
not
a
be
fair
any answer
question.
to that question
But
or
one
anything
second.
that we could know about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So just a second, okay. That's why we're here, to know the answers. So
Well, we can try, but I'm
okay,
pretty
but-
skeptical that we would have the cognitive
okay, but
abilities and
okay, that's
information to
fine.
get to
But
that.
okay, so here is the thing, right? Okay, so we have this view of something made the difference. Now, if nothing made the difference, then the question is, why is it that the universe is here? And at that point, you're positing brute facts, which is just very problematic and I think self-undermining, because after all, if the universe is Craig brings an example that some people think is childish, but I'll say it. If it's the property of universes that they can arise from nothing, what is it that stops, for example, your beliefs from? I'll finish. What is it that, for example, prevents your beliefs from holding to same objections? So, what is it fundamentally? Why you believe currently that you're standing in front of me and talking to me? Well, because of your memories, which you're relying to from second to second. Memories arise. And the fundamental presupposition to counter skepticism is that I am justified to believe that my memories are reliable unless shown otherwise, right? I'm justified in believing it unless I am shown otherwise, unless, for example, there is a reason that would disprove it. But if you're committed to the view that things could happen for absolutely no reason, what is preventing you from stipulating and undercutting the feeder that says that the memories that arise in your mind about me are brutally contingent facts that arise with no difference maker whatsoever, right? And I think that with that kind of view, with that kind of skeptical reductio, where does the foundation for science go? Where does the foundation for anything go if we have this fundamental view that things happen without causes, and asking the question might never have the answer? Do you see the worry that we have?
So I haven't committed myself to the view that things within the universe happen with no causes, although perhaps they can, but that's a separate question. Obviously, there's a story to be told about where memories come from, and I don't think the question as to the difference maker of the beginning of the universe has any bearing on that. We're talking about things within the universe that happen in context where we have quite a lot of knowledge about how things work. Obviously, in that case, I'm not just going to have a belief that pops into my mind for no reason, right? That saying that there may or may not be a difference maker to why the universe came into being is totally different and really not at all connected to saying that there may be beliefs that pop into my mind for no reason at all or because of no cause at all. I don't see how they're in any way analogous.
Yeah, so I'll finish this up in a minute, but what I was saying is that when you're positing that things can fundamentally begin to exist without a cause, you're positing and undercutting the feeder for your own.
Well, I don't think it is.
Well, I understand.
I haven't endorsed the principle that things simpliciter can come into being without any difference maker. I've said that perhaps the universe could. That's
So
not
what
saying
is
that
it? So
anything could.
So what is it about the universe that's so different?
Well, the universe is all of space and time. Obviously, that's fundamentally different from anything within space and time. Things cannot come into being in space and time, as far as you know, with no difference maker. But you're talking about all of space and time itself. That's a totally different ballgame.
But what's the main difference? I mean, do the laws of causation not apply? Or sorry,
I don't think the laws of causation do apply outside of space and time, because I think causation is a relation between space and temporal events. So it only applies within space and time.
right? Okay, fine. Then Okay, that's fine. Then we'll have to move on. All right. So
But I'm happy for the sake of argument to agree with premise one.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. You
I don't think it's that implausible. I'm not convinced in it as you are.
Yeah. Okay. So you're like 1/3. Let's just say 1/3 is good. Well, at least in some possible, at least it's possible that the universe began. Okay. Now I guess this is the problematic one. The universe began to exist. Do you disagree?
I think it's likely the universe began to exist. Yes. Again, I'm probably not as convinced in it as you are. No, likely. I think it probably did. Yes.
Wait. So you're saying that the Kalam succeeding is very likely?
Well, it depends what you mean by the Kalam. Okay. Whose version?
Okay. So do you believe that
Craig's version? No. Because Craig assumes that it relies on, or thinks that it relies on presentism.
Okay, whatever. So you're not talking to Craig, you're talking to me. So
yeah, well, you said the Kalam. If you want to say your Kalam, then well, I don't know. I haven't seen the rest of the
Islamic cosmological argument. That's what I call it. Okay, so the universe. So then, do you think that in that world, therefore, the universe as a cause is a valid conclusion?
Therefore, from those two premises, yes, obviously.
Okay, it is. Okay, so no disagreement there. All right, so let's move on to what I call the stage 2 of the cosmological argument, and you tell me what's wrong with it, okay?
Sure.
So the stage 2, for those of you that don't know, is that stage which seems to say, here's what justifies us identifying the first cause with God. Okay, so let's go into that. Okay, premise 4. The cause of the universe is either an abstract fact or a concrete fact. That's a true dichotomy. Do you agree?
I think I'm happy with that premise I'm happy to accept that premise, but I just want to make a general comment. I'm generally not comfortable with dichotomies like that. Why? Sure. Because I'm just more skeptical about things like that. Perhaps there are types of entities that we just have no idea about and can't even conceptualize. And when we're talking about the beginning of the universe as a whole, I think we need to entertain that seriously. But for the sake of argument, sure, let's go with it.
Let's go with it. All right. So abstractions are constantly inert, so whatever caused the universe is a concrete fact, right?
Yeah, that's the standard analysis. I'm happy with that.
Okay, fine. Now, this is where it got problematic with Joe Schmidt, so I'm sure it's going to get problematic with you. The universe consists of time-space, or space-time, which includes matter. Therefore, the cause of the universe is not spatial, temporal, or material. Do you agree with that?
Sorry, I'm just reading what the universe consists of space-time, which includes matter.
Yeah.
Yes. Therefore, the cause of space-time cannot be temporal, spatial, or material. I don't think that follows from 7 because so in 7 you say that space-time includes matter. Yes. Maybe you mean to say includes all matter, like there's no matter outside of space-time.
Well, if there is, it's so different that referring to it as matter is kind of equivocation.
Well, that's a tricky question.
Yeah.
I think it's going to hinge on the notion of matter. I mean, I think that there are states that plausibly can be described as material, and by that I mean that they would be described by a completed or at least a sufficiently completed theory of quantum gravity.
Yeah. That's not what I mean. Now, what I mean by material is
if that would not count as material, then then sure. The universe had, I'm happy with just saying the universe had a non-material cause. Then, yep.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Okay, good. So now just follows the universe is a concrete cause that sounds spaceless and material. Now here's a 10 that I don't think anyone should disagree with. Change is a temporal notion. That means it presupposes time.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
So
there are people who challenge pretty much all of these, but why not? Let's go with it.
Why not? So the cause of the universe is changeless.
Wait, you've already said. You said it's timeless.
Yeah, it's timeless.
The cause cannot change. Oof. The cause of the universe cannot change. I'm not entirely sure what that means. So I think it could cease to exist. I guess that would count as changing. So I'm not sure.
How could something that is atemporal cease to exist?
Well, why not? Well, what's the argument that it couldn't?
Well, for a change to happen, there would have to be state A, and there has to be state B, and state B differs from state A. But the difference between the states presupposes a passage of some kind of time, and since there is no time.
No, I don't think it does. So time is a temporally ordered notion. You could just have two states that don't stand in a temporal order with respect to one another. I mean, Craig thinks this. I'm not saying that because Craig thinks that you have to. Yeah. The point about it is that that's not some weird materialist move that I'm making there. That's just saying that there could be different states that don't stand in temporal relation to one another, such as a timeless state and the first moment of a temporal state.
Okay, so that's what you would challenge. All right, so let's continue. Now, so I just continue. I just introduce more Aristotelian notions. Oppie accepts them. You might reject it. I say change is the actualization of potential. You know what that means, or should I explain that?
Not really, no. I don't really know what it means. I mean, I've
Okay,
heard
so
Aristotelians use this, but I don't
okay,
really understand it.
so it's just analysis of change. What is it that change means? So what change means is that a property could be some things in the actual world, but there are things that could not be. So, for example, my coffee could be cold, but it could not be an elephant, whatever happened. So, for change to occur is when that potential for it to be cold becomes actual. So that's just the analysis of change.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so then we infer. Okay, so this is a more tricky, but I'm gonna. I'm just gonna go briefly through these because I want to get to the premises that posit an intellect. So here it is: that which is immune to change cannot, in principle, involve actualizations of potential because actualization of potential is change. So the cause of the universe has no potentials that could be actualized. Okay, it's everything that it could ever be because there is no state it could be into. Now, again, you've rejected this somewhat. That's fine.
Yeah.
For there to be more than one changeless cause of the universe, one of those causes would have to have something the other lacks. Standard Leibniz law. Lack is a privation and thus an unactualized potential. Being changeless, the cause of the universe cannot contain unactualized potentials, so there is only one cause of the universe. Now, I'm sure you disagree with some of these inferences, so if you want to say something, go ahead. But
I'm not really sure about 17, but I don't really know if I want to get into that.
Okay, that's fine.
I'd have to think about
All
that.
right. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so let's see. Okay, now this is a challenging one because we hold to what's called the principle of proportionate causality, which says that whatever is in the effect must in some way be in the cause, whether eminently, formally, or otherwise.
I've heard of this. I also don't
Yeah.
really know what that means.
Okay, so that means that the cause must always have some property of being able to bring about the effect. And by the cause, it doesn't have to be singular. So there can be multiple causes, but together they have to have something in them that is sufficient to bring about the effect.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
okay.
Yeah,
So
that's how cause works.
It doesn't mean So it doesn't mean that, for example, two pieces of wood have to be lit on fire to cause fire. What it means is two together should always be sufficient and have something necessary to have produced the effect.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why that premise is needed there. I mean, isn't that just the standard idea of causation?
Well, no, some people deny that, but that's fine. You'll get what I mean.
That's beyond my pay grade. I don't understand that.
Okay, that's fine. But here's where it gets tricky, because we say the forms and patterns, and this is just abstract objects and universals and other things that are in the universe, must in some way be found in whatever the cause of the universe is.
Be grounded in.
Yeah.
Well, I would just say they're caused by it. I don't know what grounded in means here. What does that add? Obviously, they're caused by the cause of the universe.
Yeah, but the PPC says that the cause of the universe must in some way contain them.
Well, I think it's in some way that's doing the work there. And I don't really understand what you mean by contain them. Causally give rise to is not, in my understanding at least, the same as containing something. A cause may contain the capacity to give rise to its effect, but I don't really see how that means it contains its effect. This may be just Aristotelian way of describing things that, again, I don't profess great familiarity with.
Yeah. So basically what we're saying is that the cause of the universe must in some way possess the abstract objects it gives to the universe, whether formally or eminently. And then we get to this premise that the cause of the universe cannot be a particular, and therefore the way they exist are the only way the abstract objects can exist.
Sorry, which premise are we looking at the moment?
Yeah. Can you see my cursor? We're looking.
Yeah, I can see that. 22.
23 and
23, sorry.
23 and 24, 22, 23, 24. So what we're saying is, and you would agree as a nominalist, that abstract objects, whether fictional or real, and I'm a moderate realist, that means that I don't believe in Platonic forms. I just believe much of the same thing that nominalists believe, only I believe that they really exist. So I guess that wasn't informative. But so what I mean is that I believe that abstract objects can only exist in two ways. They can only exist either in the mind or in the thing. So, for example, blueness can either exist in blue books, blue shirts, or as a concept in the mind. Those are the only two ways abstractions can exist.
Sure.
Now, even as a nominalist, you would accept that, even though you don't think abstract objects exist, because there can be blue books, and blueness is a fictional thing, and they are concepts in the mind. So what we're saying is that the cause of the universe cannot be literally all the abstractions. So the only other option left is that it has an intellect in which it conceptualizes those abstractions. Are you following?
Not entirely. So I'm trying to work out what, because premises 23 and 24 are pretty 22 to 24 pretty weighty. Well, hang on, I want to read 22 again. These forms or patterns can exist either in the concrete way in which they exist in individual particular things, or in the abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an intellect. They cannot exist in the cause of the universe in the same way they exist in individual particular things. So they must be, hang on. So 23 there, you say they cannot exist in the cause of the universe in the same way they exist in individual particular things.
So
that's obviously true, but why does it have to be the same way?
Yeah. So here's what I'm saying, just simply. So blueness can exist in two ways, and you would agree as a nominalist. I agree as a moderate realist. It exists in particulars like blue books, and it exists as a concept in our minds, right? Now, the cause of the universe obviously cannot contain literally be blueness or be blue or red at the same time. So the only other way it can contain abstractions is by conceptualizing of them, and that requires an intellect.
I mean, I don't think blueness exists, but aside from that, I don't think. Why does the cause of the universe need to contain blueness? Doesn't it all it? I would say that it just needs to contain the causes, or I mean, be the cause sufficient to bring about. Blueness. But that's not the same thing as containing it. At least I would say it's not the same.
I get that, but the problem is that abstract objects are not spatio-temporal. That means that blueness cannot begin to exist, and that is true whether you're a fiction nominalist or a moderate realist. So like blueness cannot begin to exist. Blue things could, but blueness as a concept cannot.
Yeah, but I don't think blueness exists. So I don't see how this argument is relevant for a nominalist.
Well, okay, so forget blueness. Let's talk about mathematical truths. You believe that mathematical truths exist, right?
Well, no. I mean, I wouldn't. I think that you can.
But do you believe that 1 + 1?
They're true, but I don't think that they exist. Right? That's the nominalist position. They don't exist.
Okay, I got that.
So they're not going to exist in the cause of the universe.
Okay, but let's put it this way. You believe that 1 + 1 = 2.
Sure.
And that's a true statement.
Yes.
So do you believe that propositions exist?
Again, no. None of these things I think exist in the way that I think you mean. Well, I don't think this sort of language is ontologically committing.
Okay, but I don't believe in Platonic realism either. I don't believe that there's a realm where these things exist. Yeah. I believe that there's real concepts that exist.
Obviously, the concepts exist, yes.
Okay. So now, abstract objects like blueness do obviously exist, though you don't believe that there's a realm in which they exist. You believe that blueness is our way of describing all things that are blue, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And you believe that blueness can also exist in the way in which our mind conceptualizes it.
Well, that's what I would say. Not outside of our minds, no. Blue things exist. Our concepts of it exist. Okay, but the blueness doesn't exist outside of either of those things. But you agree with that. But then you want to say it exists in the cause of the universe. That's where I'm lost. Why does it have to exist there?
But when I say it exists, what it means is that the cause of the universe conceptualizes them. They exist in its mind. It's not that the cause of the universe contains them literally, but they exist in its intellect. And the reason this is because when it brings about the universe, it cannot literally bring about abstract objects, because 1 + 1 = 2 is not a temporal notion. Even though
I agree that it can't bring about abstract objects, but why can't it just bring about blue things?
It can, and it does, but...
Yeah, but why does it have to have blueness in it in order to do that?
But where does
or in its mind, as you say?
Yeah, it has to conceptualize it, because that's the only way. But where else would it exist?
Well, I don't think blueness exists. Again, well, let me explain how I would say it.
Forget blueness. You admitted that the concept of blueness exists.
Yeah, but it doesn't exist in the cause of the universe. The concept of blueness exists in our minds, and maybe there are aliens who have it. Okay, but I don't think it existed in the cause of the universe. No.
Okay, but this is why I brought the example that there are abstractions that are true mind independently, like 1 + 1 = 2, right?
Well, so I don't think that all truths are ontologically committing in that way. So yeah, it's true.
But do you believe that 1 + 1
there's not a proposition that's out there somewhere that's true, in my opinion?
Fine, I agree with that. I agree that there is no Platonic realm. We agree. I'm asking you, is it true that if all minds, finite minds, were annihilated today, 1 + 1 would still = 2? Would that be a true statement?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
You don't know?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I need to think more about philosophy of mathematics.
All right, whatever. Okay, so
it might be. You can go with that if you like. So I don't know that your conclusion would follow from it being true. So we can just go with it.
All right, we have to move on. Okay, so in general, this is how we get to there being an intellect, and then we conclude by saying, so there's a single cause of the universe that is timeless, spaceless, material, unchanging, that it's intellect. But for there to be such a cause of the universe, just what it is for God to exist, so God exists. I'm going to link this in the private chat or chat, so you can analyze this like later videos, because I think this is the more defensible version of the Kalam. Now, I will touch on concluding remarks, and then I will open up the room to questions, if that's okay with you, because that's what we do. So, guys, now the room is open. You are free to either come in or ask questions of me and James. Make sure to come in and do whatever. But yeah, so do you want to begin the question period, or should I?
Well, if I can just make one brief remark in terms of to finish out the Kalam segment here. So apart from our initial discussion about the causal principle and related matters, I think the main part that I disagree with is trying to say that or your assertion that I still don't fully understand it, but some aspect of abstract quantities must be present in the cause of the universe. And
conceptually.
Yeah, sorry, they conceptually must be present. And I confess I don't quite understand why that has to be the case. But so those are the two parts that I'm not as persuaded on. Just to
guys,
end that out.
The room is open. I can already see some of the questions. That's funny. Guys, come in. We have a bunch of trolls, by the way, so I'll just ignore trollish questions. I get trolls all the time. They love me. What can I say? But so...
I think you've done your own share of trolling, haven't you?
Of course I've done trolling. What are you talking about? I used to be a master troll. So guys, you can come in. So now let me ask you a question. Oh my gosh, this can't be Tiny Tofi. Tofi, is that you?
Hey, it's me, Tiny Tofi.
Yeah, what's up, Mikolesh? Oh my gosh, the real OG finally. Yeah, Detroyer, what did you think about my performance?
Sorry, give me 1 second.
Okay, so James. Okay, so for those of you that have questions, just come in and do it. But so there is some people that are critical. If you know, again, they're trollish, but I'll just display it because I think you're pretty grown enough to handle some insults. So so they think that your appeal to quantum is some kind of a escape hatch. So I'll just say this, and I'm not saying I make that criticism, but a lot of people feel that when you say quantum, how do you respond to that? So there's John Smith. There's a bunch of comments. You don't have to read them, but there it is. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, that can be a valid criticism, but I want to clarify a bit here. So, well, I was going to say as a naturalist, although I think that this should be true for everyone, really, but especially as a naturalist, I am going to try to understand the origins of the universe in terms of our best scientific theories. And I think everyone should try to do that. But obviously, that's particularly of interest to me as a naturalist, right? Our best scientific theories for the origin of the universe require a quantum theory of gravity. Now, there are a lot of hypotheses out there that I think are interesting. None of them have been proved or are definitive. So I'm not just making a vague appeal to quantum. What I'm saying is that there are hypotheses about the origin of the universe which make appeal to various just broadly quantum concepts without going into the details. And in some of these cases, our classical, our intuitive notions about time and space and cause don't apply. So I do think it's actually important to make these sorts of distinctions. That's why I used the language of quantum, because I think basically you have to when you start talking about the origin of the universe. It's a quantum process, whatever it was.
Mikolesh, Jack is asking for a Zoom link. Can you send it to him? I'll put it in private chat. Yeah.
I have a bunch of comments.
Go ahead, Detroit. What did you want to say? Who do you think performed better?
I'm not really interested in arguing about who won.
I'm joking. Yeah, I'm joking.
I'd rather not argue about who won, but you didn't. Look, I think
Mikolesh,
we've talked about your argument.
Good and it's not good.
I'm doing it.
Good. We've talked about your argument on here before. I really think, all the other problems aside, when you bring up the principle of proportional causality, like it's so obvious that you're doing this bait and switch, right? Because when you first say it, you say something really like almost trivial in that, like, for some cause to produce some effect, it has to have at least the capacity to produce that effect, or something like that, right? And that's just like trivial, right? It produces the effect and it had the capacity or whatever to do that. But then it seems like you want to defend something much different in the later premises, where it's like the abstractions or the universals in the effect must be present in the cause either eminently or abstractly. Like, why would anyone accept that? That's not.
Yeah. So me and James agree that abstract objects exist. Sorry, we don't agree that they exist, but we agree that we can conceptualize of abstract objects, and we agree that there is no Platonic realm of forms. And so what I brought up was, again, maybe he didn't want to. What did I say? Maybe he isn't that studied in philosophy of mathematics, and fine. Philosophy of mathematics is very complicated. All over the place.
And you are?
Okay. Simple question, but I asked a simple question. Wait, let me share Jack's stuff. Jack, are you there? Yeah, so, okay, Jack is connecting. So, like, what I wanted to say was this. 1 + 1 = 2 is mind-independently true. And I think that should be obvious to anybody. So there is... I should probably remove this. Hang on. Okay, there you go. Jack, you should be able to hear us now. Jack, can you hear us? You should be able to. Okay, so here's what I said. I believe that 1 + 1 = 2 is mind-independently true. I believe that would be a true statement, even if everybody was dead. So what I'm saying is, it's not spatio-temporal or mind-dependent.
Well, this becomes tricky, right? Because when we say that it's true, are we committing to some sort of truth bearers here? Because if we are,
okay,
then
that's beyond our pay grade.
I imagine
so that's beyond our
truth bearers are mental, if anything at all. And so if there are no minds, there's no truth bearers and no truth. Okay. That's a plausible view.
We're getting an infinite regress here with showing the stream. Is that intended?
Yeah. So I'm trying to connect people with Zoom. Does that bother you too much?
Oh, I mean, I just think it's a bit distracting for viewers, but
it's not visually, it's not very good. But if you had something like Streamlabs set up, you could easily.
Okay, Detroyer.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Jack, can you hear us?
I don't think he can hear you. Maybe you should shout louder.
Okay, great.
I heard him.
Okay, so Tofi, what do you think James is wrong about?
What is he wrong about?
Yeah.
Engaging in this debate.
Well, except being wrong on everything, what else is he wrong about?
I think the everything there is already universal.
Right?
So.
If I give some answer, it's going to be a subset of.
Could I just actually say something about the existence of mathematical truths?
Before you say, Richard Romanchuk had a question for you, which was, you can read that, but doesn't the mathematical nature of quantum mechanics prove the abstract is not causally inert?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I would say no, because I think that,
how to say this?
Well, basically, yes. I mean, I think that the mathematical structure is not what causes, or the mathematics doesn't cause something. The mathematics is a description of the reality which causes things, is how I would describe it. And just to extend that to what I was just about to say, with respect to 1 + 1 = 2 being mind independently true, I think that the issue there for me is that I think concepts like one and addition are psychological abstraction. So I don't think those concepts exist without people to deploy them. I mean, I think that's true of language as a whole, right? So if you talk about propositions absent any intelligent beings to use language, I'm just not even sure what that means.
Yeah,
so that's the sense in which I'm a bit hesitant.
Yeah, it's like you're asking absent minds to conceive of propositions, or even if we think there are propositions.
That's right.
Would the propositions be true? I mean, like what?
Yeah, but there's a problem there, right? Because the fact is that mathematics seems to be something that was discovered. In fact, we use the word discovery in mathematics, like when we discovered calculus, or when we discovered Descartes' analytic geometry. I mean, I'm a great mathematician, right? I'm joking. I'm not great at mathematics. But so the thing is that these are discovered truths. So what I'm saying is, how can something that's completely mind-dependent be discovered rather than simply being invented? That's where the problem lies.
Why would we grant that it's discovered?
Yeah, and also there are ways to...
James, go ahead. Do you have anything to say there?
Well, the question of whether mathematics is discovered or invented is obviously a tricky one. I mean, I think it's a mixture of both. So I think absolutely some mathematics is invented in the sense of it's like I think calculus is a good example, is it's developed by people with a very specific intention in mind. But a lot of mathematics is discovered as well, and I don't think there's anything too mysterious about that, because basically what we do is we start with a set of axioms, and then we see what are the consequences of these. And because we're limited, we don't immediately see the consequence, all of the logical consequences of our axioms. We have to discover them by a lot of effort, and we may discover consequences that are highly non-obvious, like many famous theorems that are proved. It's like, well, logically they were a consequent of postulates made maybe centuries ago, but we didn't see that until we knew how to combine them in the right way. So that's the sense in which we can discover consequences of our own stipulated postulates. At least that's how I think about it.
Yeah, so I mean, sorry, I accidentally added to the wrong playlist. So yeah, by the way, James, you can reuse any part of this debate for your own.
Oh, cheers.
Yeah.
Why do you call it the Global Skeptics Podcast?
Because it's a cool name.
I just wondered if all the people who were on it were global skeptics, or
no.
Just Canadian.
Only the people that deny the PSR.
I'm a global skeptic.
Canadian denies that he exists.
Well, I used to, but not anymore. But yeah, so what the problem is, yeah, you can just reuse this. And by the way, my kalam, I devised it on the fly, so I'd be honored if you analyzed it or anything. It's a pretty.
Do you like my name?
Yeah, I love it. Kalam Chowder. Oh my gosh, I'm kicking him out. So yeah, I think that no, Benabiri, I'm not a substance dualist. I'm a hylomorphic dualist. So you're wrong. But yeah, so I think, James, that the problem is that ultimately there's two competing worldviews, right? And I think that one worldview can make sense of the data and the other has problems. And that's not to say that there aren't good people on this side. I'm just saying they have this problem that they have. And I mean, I understand you disagree with this, but that's where the conflict lies in my view.
Well, yeah, and I think that I take a view very similar to Oppie's, in which what we should be doing is comparing the different worldviews on the basis of explanatory virtues with respect to different phenomena. And I think that today we've looked at two different phenomena, one being the origin of the universe, the other being some aspects of the mind.
Psychology,
yeah, you call psychology, I would call philosophy mind, but I'm not convinced that in either of those cases we need to postulate anything beyond material reality. Obviously you are, so there's a difference there. But I mean, I think that this is the right approach. I would just say about your version of the Kalam, Canadian, that I think it's more useful to, I mean, this is just my opinion, ignore this. I think it's more useful to focus on how do different people understand the origin or origination or beginning of the universe under different worldviews, as opposed to trying to push a 27 premise argument. I mean, that can be helpful, right, to try to elicit differences of opinion. But you can also just say, well, how do you think about the beginning of the universe? How do you think about it? And then we compare the theories and see, what's the plot.
Yeah. So my view is that since the best science seems to indicate, and we don't even need to go to philosophy, since the best science seems to indicate that the universe began to exist, and even you seem to think that's likely, I mean, it really becomes really hard to defend some sort of materialism in a meaningful sense, right?
Well, no, but that all depends on, can materialists account for the beginning of the universe without postulating something non-material? And then that's where the question.
Yeah. So that's where you have the problem,
theories?
right? Because I mean, if you have space-time beginning to exist, well, you're really stretching the imagination when you're saying, okay, whatever exists sans space-time is also matter because, right?
So you're postulating an infinite God. How is that not stretching the imagination?
Why isn't, just to be clear, why suppose there is something sans space-time?
Yep. He could be thinking that the universe does not exhaust all space-time.
Yeah, but well,
suppose we had the view that the universe exhausts all that there is. I mean, leave the abstract objects thing aside. Why? What's the problem with that view?
Yeah. Okay. So sans the universe. Tiny Tofi, speak up.
It's me, Tiny Tofi.
Okay. It's just my mic.
Somebody's
So
impersonating
what you have the problem.
I'm impersonating you too.
So I think what you have the problem with there is, you just cannot account for. You're just stretching the imagination, in my view, of what's possible. And I'm joking. Yeah, you're just stretching the imagination, in my view, because you're postulating something. And people tell me, "Oh, you postulate infinite God." Well, not really. I mean, infinite God. We're talking about atemporal. So
doesn't that stretch the? How does God not stretch the imagination?
Well,
Christian
because I think-
theologians throughout the centuries have said things along those lines. Like, I don't see how you can say that God doesn't stretch the imagination.
Well, I think
Are you
that
saying was
yeah, I
my
think
suggestion
that
was
in-
stretch the imagination or his? I was confused. 'Cause
well,
all
yeah,
I said
think,
was
well,
imagine
I think
that the world is exhausted by
Detroit's view
space-time.
Detroit's view is like crazy because he thinks that things can come from nothing. But James doesn't hold to that. Like James is saying,
Wait, what's
listen, dude.
when I say come from nothing, I just mean that there wasn't something from which it came.
Exactly.
right?
So that's just coming from nothing. But
yeah,
I don't think that's
What's
coming
the-
from nothing. Coming from nothing
okay,
is like
okay, coming from nothing is having
nothing.
no.
The
So
non-existent
coming
things
from
are
nothing.
causing.
Okay, so coming from nothing means that it had no efficient cause, formal cause, material, or final cause of any kind. That's coming from
Correct.
nothing. Well, actually, the formal cause, material causes are. Well, okay, let's.
Yeah,
put
I
it
mean,
this way.
strictly speaking, it could have a formal cause.
Yeah, it could have a formal cause,
Yeah.
but okay, it had no efficient.
No efficient, no
cause.
material. Yeah.
No efficient cause, no material cause.
Yeah.
And if you believe that, that's coming from nothing. Now, James
Okay.
says that it's harder to say on material, but he agrees that the universe could have come from no efficient cause. And I'm asking, that's not how your brain works, right? I mean, if you don't suppose that your memories could come, could begin to exist without an efficient cause. And then James says, oh, no, that's within the universe. And then there's the outside of the universe. And then I'm asking, well, what's such a big deal, right? I mean,
Okay, well,
yeah,
let
I'm
me
trying to
let me try to
understand.
explain that
Yeah.
again. So my idea is that, and I actually think this is a fairly standard idea, not universal. Causation is a process that is only actually defined within space-time.
yeah, that's just
So
to
if you
beg the
start to
question
apply
against. Yeah, that's just to beg the question.
It's not
against-
begging the question. I'm just saying what I think of it. It would be begging the question if that was the conclusion and I use that as a premise. I'm not. I'm just explaining how I think about it.
All right.
And you're criticizing that. So this is just an attempt to avoid the criticism, not to convince you to agree with me. So all I'm saying is I understand causation to be something that applies within space-time. And then if you try to apply it outside of space-time, well, obviously it's not going to apply. So I don't see what the problem is there. Now, maybe you just say, I don't think that the cause is within space-time. Then we could argue about that. That's fine. That's a perfectly legit discussion.
Yeah,
but I
so-
don't think your criticism applies that I would have to then think that things within space-time can happen without causes.
Yeah, so my point is there could be different things, but what I'm saying is you believe that anything that begins to exist in space-time has a cause?
Didn't you say he was open to that, or like not convinced?
I think that's probably true. I mean, as long as you allow indeterminate causes, then yeah, I think that's probably true.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, we agree.
Yeah.
All causes are indeterminate because we're not determinists. But
Well,
Well, you don't need to be determinist to think that some. Anyway,
okay, Detroiter. Okay, Detroiter. Okay, no. Okay, maybe I misspoke. I'm not sure if all causes are indeterminate, but so indeterministic. So here's the problem, right? And again, I mean, we've gone over this, and I think we're wrapping it up. But the point is, my point of view is that unless somebody's offering what's the relevant difference going to be, then they have a problem. Because we could always say, for example, there's a difference between different kinds of causation. Like I would say that agent causation is different than event-event causation and state-state causation. And you know,
sure, and we could talk about that.
Yeah, that's something. I mean, we're like, it's like we're just relaxing now. The official debate or discussion is over. But what I'm saying is, I'm not seeing that there is justification to be offered as to why we are willing to postulate something like sounds the universe.
I'm not actually postulating anything particular about what, like, the difference maker, as you call it, because I really don't know. I don't think that we have any business of thinking that we could know or have it. Our concepts would even apply to that. We're talking literally sans the universe. Like, why think that we would know much of anything about that? So I'm awaiting some reason for thinking that we should have knowledge about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that a lot was said. I mean, I'm sure that you will review my version of the Kalam. I mean, 27 premises, so it's not something that most people are used to. I just devised it to, like, smash it in the face of those who tell me.
I do like that you make your commitments explicit, although I do find some of the premises a little hard to understand. It's good to put things explicitly rather than hide them under premises.
Yeah, but I devised them for people that say, oh, the Kalam doesn't get you to a God, it just gets you to a cause. And I'm like, no, it gets you to a God, it's correct, right? That's how Al-Ghazali formulated it. And I think that's how Craig does it in his book. And again, some people disagree, but I mean, from what I know of Craig, that's how he formulates it in the book. That he gives other reasons, of course. He doesn't believe in the kind of God I believe in. He disagrees. He has a different view of the Trinity. He believes that God consists of parts, metaphysical parts, or he denies metaphysical parts exist. I believe that God is composed of no parts at all, as in God is a simple substance. So that's going to be different. He's a nominalist. I'm a moderate realist. We're close, a little different, but
Actually, I have a question about that, if you
Yeah.
don't mind. So, do
Yeah.
you think it is how to articulate this? Do you think it matters or it's important from, I guess, a theological perspective? Oh, theological, maybe I don't know, salvific perspective,
Yeah.
maybe. Whether one has, say, a Catholic view of God or a Craigian view of God or
well, just to clarify,
Swinburne's view
though,
of God or whatever.
yeah, just to clarify, though, this isn't the Catholic view. The view of God I affirm was affirmed by Luther, Calvin, Eastern Orthodox fathers, and philosophers. It's not a Catholic view; it's a traditional view. I do think it
I
matters.
mean, it can be both, right?
Yes, it can be both, but I just want to make this clear. This
Sure.
isn't kind of a Catholic commitment. This is a view that was
But there are a
held.
lot of non-Catholics today who don't hold it. That's all that I mean.
And there
by
are
that.
some Catholics that disagree with this view, yes.
Sure.
But just to clarify, Luther held to this view, Calvin held to this view, Geisler had to something, Matt Slick holds to divine simplicity, and David Bentley Hart hold to. Now, just to clarify, I think that Richard Swinburne, as much as I respect him, proposes a version of tritheism. And I used to subscribe to that view. And do I think he does it intentionally? No. But do I think that someone who persists in that error is in danger? Yes. Now, I believe that Swinburne honestly believes that, so I believe that he's invincibly ignorant. But I do think that there's ramifications between a tritheistic view of God and a monotheistic view of God. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm just curious how
Yeah.
sort of weighty you think this sort of stuff is.
Of course,
Because some
yeah.
people will say that these questions are interesting but don't ultimately matter that much
no,
in terms of, I don't know,
for me,
salvific
no.
import or however you want to phrase
No,
it.
they do matter, but I do think that people who hold to slightly heretical views of Trinity can be saved. But
Yeah,
I
And
sure.
you said you think that somebody who holds to this sort of view.
Tofi, okay,
I'm
I
just
know.
What?
Yeah.
I was just asking a question. I was just going to say, you said you think that somebody who holds to this sort of view is in danger. I was just wondering, do you think that people who haven't been baptized are in danger?
Bye. Jack, do you hear this? This is all Mary's fault. So James, the problem is, so I'm a Catholic, traditional Catholic, I guess. I mean, and when I say traditional, I don't mean a Sedia Vacantist. I just mean a person who holds to traditional views. As in, I do believe that in the Eucharist, I'm not one of those cultural Catholics who, all that they are is just go to church, come back. I'm like a traditional Catholic. So yeah, I believe in all of those issues and traditional stuff.
Have you seen any of Cameron's videos with the that Exorcist guy?
Lampert, Vince
I saw
Lampert.
Yeah,
that.
that's right.
That guy's crazy,
Yeah,
bro.
I love those videos. So funny.
Do you take that sort of stuff seriously, or what he says seriously?
I agree that exorcism happens. Yeah, I can't comment on whether Father Vince Lampert has
Wait, you think that there are demons that are sometimes exorcised?
I do, yeah. That's traditional Catholic. Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
actually, so Lampert says that in his interaction with other with other priests, they claim, or at least some of them claim, that they didn't know that they still believed in this stuff. I think he quotes that's a close quote from him in one part of the interview. So I was just interested in what he said.
Catholic doctrine is that exorcisms, happen. I don't think that Vince Lampert is crazy. I think, again, he's an interesting fellow. I think that Cameron really hit. I mean, if you see, it's the most popular video. It's like two of the most popular videos on his channel. And, I find Cameron wrong about that view of God. Hi, Randolph. Hi, Jonathan. I think that Cameron disagrees with divine simplicity. I think that's a problem. He holds to skinny jeans Christianity, which I also find somewhat, that kind. But, I mean, in terms of him not being anti-Catholic, I appreciate that. I think it's wonderful. And
I just ask about that because I think that's one of the more harmful manifestations of Christianity or of certain types of Christian belief. So I was just curious.
Yeah, no, I do believe that exorcisms happen. Now, that doesn't mean that I will attribute all mental illnesses to. Thanks, Randolph. What's up, buddy? You can drop by. Hi, Otangelo. So yeah, I believe. Okay, Otangelo, I think you have some questions for James Fodor. He doesn't agree with your teleological. So James, you have like 10 more minutes to talk with Otangelo. And
Yeah, sure.
then okay, Otangelo, go ahead. So Otangelo doesn't hold to my views. He thinks that the Kalam works, and well, that we agree, but we disagree on parts.
It should be good.
And he believes that the divine watchmaker analogy is really good. I have problems, but it's fine. Okay, go, Otangelo. Have a little interaction with James, and then we'll finish up.
Yeah, let me check here what's happening.
James. And yeah, my name is Joshua, by the way, or Josh. So, that's my name. That's what you can call me. Okay, go ahead, Otangelo.
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Hi, James. Why is the universe finally adjusted to permit life in special atoms?
Oh, we're going for a fine-tuning argument. Well, as you probably know, I don't think that it is fine-tuned. But suppose that we stipulate that it is, I don't think that we have a very good explanation for that. I don't think theists do either.
Well, I think we have, actually, that God finally...
Well, I know that you do.
the universe to permit life, but I mean, doubting that the universe is fine-tuned would go about against the evidence which we have, and there are many things that have to be adjusted. That starts with the Big Bang and ends even with biochemistry, which has to be finely tuned. Like, for example, the proton mass is 1,836 times the one of an electron. If this ratio were off even slightly, molecules would not form properly, and it could have any other. The proton could have any other mass value, and the mass space is from 0 to 10 to the 60th power. This a huge space of possible masses that the proton could have. Why does it have precisely the mass which is required to work, to have the plus and negative, positive and negative charge with the electron and permitting life? And there are many other things that have also to be right, like the ratio of the mass between the proton and the neutron. If that would not be right, then we wouldn't have stable atoms either, and there would be no life. And I could go on. There are at least 9 different things, ratios, which must be all at once just right. How do you explain that?
I don't think we really have time to go into all this now. I'd refer you to the debate that I did with Luke Barnes, where I discussed this. I mean, it's possible you've already seen that. That would be my best recommendation there. If you want, though, I would ask, what do you? I guess there's different ways of phrasing this question on Tangelo, but why does God care about the mass of the proton, for example, or any of these things that you mentioned? Like, why is that relevant to God? Why does he fine-tune them?
Because otherwise there would be no stable atoms, and we wouldn't be here having this conversation.
But why does God care if there are stable atoms? What difference does that make to God?
Well, because he had to create humans and
sorry, you cut
else.
out there. Can you say the last couple of sentences again? I couldn't understand.
I think because he had the goal to create a life-permitting universe and us.
Yeah, but why does God need a life-permitting universe for us to exist? God is omnipotent, right?
Yes, but the omnipotence doesn't mean that he can do anything. He couldn't. It is the same as if I tell you, James, I need that you make a car for me in order for me to drive from A to B. Of course, you need a very specific specification or in order to have a functional car. You cannot just take anything and then make a car. The same holds up with the universe and life. There has to be a specific specification and complexity in order to reach that goal.
But God is not constrained by physical laws. I understand he's constrained by logical possibilities, but I'm not asking for anything logically impossible. I mean, if you believe, as I believe you do, Tangelo, that God can perform miracles, such as raising Jesus from the dead, then he's not constrained by natural laws, what's possible in the natural order of things. So why doesn't he just make life that isn't dependent on the laws of nature?
As I told you, in the same manner that we are constrained when we have to make a device for
But we're
specific
finite. God is
purpose,
infinite. God is omnipotent.
Are you
I don't
familiar
understand
with
why God would be constrained by the laws of physics as we are.
Sin-Hababu's paper, Electrons and
well,
Masses?
first of all, the laws of physics itself, they have to be instantiated and then secured in the sense that, as I said previously, the atoms, if you don't have them in the right configuration and finely tuned, they would not be stable during billions of years. They would maybe just be stable for 15 minutes or for
How
even
is this an
for
answer to his question?
or nanoseconds. So I don't think God can make atoms in any configuration because he is omnipotent. He can
The
do what
question
is
is, why
possible.
can't he create life without having any sort of natural universe or anything like that? Why can't he just create life? He doesn't need to make
Again,
atoms, right?
Well, yes, it is necessary because God
It's
cannot.
necessary to make atoms to make life.
His omnipotence must be defined. It doesn't mean that he can simply do anything he wants.
What
Why
does
does
it
he
mean
need to
then?
make atoms
I
to
guess
make
that's
life?
my question.
What is life essentially material necessarily?
Yeah, well, like,
So how do you define omnipotence? Because the way most people understand omnipotence, it means all-powerful, so that means you can do anything. And of course, coupled up with omniscience, that means someone who's omnipotent would be able to do anything and know how to do it properly.
Anything that's logically possible. That doesn't imply contradiction.
If it's true omnipotence, then, I find there are quite a lot of religious people a lot of theists who will say that they don't have to contend with the laws of logic. And then there's others who are on your side and say they do.
Yeah, I mean, but
It's not a subtle point as far as I know.
But some people just use omnipotence in different ways.
Jack,
Well, that's fair, but what I'm asking about doesn't imply any contradiction, so I just want to put that aside and ask why
it
God
seems
needs
like
atoms for
Changeless
life
kind
to
of thinks
exist.
it does. Seems
Which
like
is a
he
good
thinks,
question.
It seems like he thinks somehow, in order to create life, you need to create atoms.
Well, I would like to know how Otangelo defines omnipotence, though, just so that going forward we have some clarity there, because I think that's a point that sounds like there may be some misunderstanding.
Okay, I will quote. Okay, let me quote here Randolph. But it's more precise to say that he has the power to do all things that power is capable of doing. Power can't make an illogical statement logical. It can't create, for example, a square circle. And the same entails in regards of the physical world. He cannot do simply anything. He cannot create physical life based on a universe without atoms.
Okay, so you're looking at omnipotence as being with a couple of provisos, a few limitations, but for the most part, aside from those limitations, he's all powerful. Is that correct?
Canadian, I am not even sure if the term all powerful or omnipotent, if it is in the Bible. I'm not sure about that.
Right. So, guys, let's just stay focused. So, anyways, James, you have you're ready to go, or how do you feel?
Well, I wanted to leave by 12 or sort of in 10 or so minutes. But yeah, I mean, if you want to wrap things up, that's fine.
Oh no, that's fine.
I don't know that I'm going to get a clear answer from Untangelo, but I mean, we can just keep going for a little bit if we want, but we'll finish up.
Yeah, so,
I know you will.
No, just to boil it down, I don't believe that God can do anything.
Yeah. So
he's saying that God is constrained by natural laws.
Well, then my question is, how does the resurrection and other miracles work? I don't understand that at all.
But also, if God is restrained by natural laws, then it's just not an explanation.
They're pretty lame God as well.
Yeah, he's not an explanation. He's not going to be an explanation for any of the natural facts, like the fine tuning of the universe.
Yeah, it's not going to explain. God's not going to explain why the mass of the proton is X, right? Because he doesn't have a choice to make anything else, right?
Yeah, and I mean, if you say that no God is necessary whatsoever to make a finely tuned universe, then the question, of course, is why has the universe selected amongst a wide range of possible parameters the right ones in order to permit a life-permitting universe? And that not just in regards of one or two things, but in regards of even thousands of different things that must be just right.
Well, maybe the others weren't possible.
Why think of it as a selection? Like the universe just is a certain way. I don't.
Yeah, well, that's essentially what I was saying. Maybe the others aren't actually possible. There's no selection. It just is the way it is. I believe that's what Graham Oppie thinks. I'm not committed to that, but that's a possible
Even if
answer.
it's possible, I don't see that we get a selection of.
Yeah, that's true.
But
Well, that's not an explanation. That's just saying,
is.
well, it is because it is, and that's it. But that doesn't explain why the universe.
Why does
is the
God
way
exist?
Oh, well, I don't know why God is rather than nothing. I have no explanation.
Well, how come I need
for
an
that.
explanation as to why the constants of nature are the way they are, but you don't need an explanation for why God exists? Like, I don't. This is what I mean. It just seems to be inconsistent about what you demand explanations for.
Yeah, and at some level, there's going to be
because
logical alternatives that there's no further explanation for.
It's not because we should expect, if naturalism were true, either no universe whatsoever, because the Big Bang also has to be finely tuned, like the cosmological constant. There are several other parameters as well.
No, but you're just going backwards.
even-
I'm saying if the constants aren't necessarily have the values they do, there is no fine tuning. It's just that's the way it is. You say that's not a good explanation, but then I ask, well, what's the explanation for why God exists? And you don't have anything to say. So at this point, as far as I can see, we're on par.
Yeah, Oppie makes a very
we
similar
are
point.
not. We are not, because physical necessity.
Wait, does Oppie
is-
actually?
is-
so
is-
James, does Oppie
Well-
actually make the same point?
He makes a very similar point.
A similar point.
Yeah, but
best argument against God.
that is
Probably
not
also.
a good refutation, because there is no physical necessity for the universe to be life permitting, and it could. I mean, it is much more
Actually, I'm
probable
Well,
that it
I
would
triple-
why?
not
How do
be
you know that?
There is,
life-permitting,
right?
because the parameters, they can be changed, and that's why physicists.
We're just going in circles.
Well,
All right. Okay. All right. So, anyways, James, I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you don't hate me.
No.
No,
It was a good chat. Thanks.
and
Yeah,
by the way,
thanks for
there was
calling.
like
Nice to meet you.
yeah. So there was
check
a
out Friction Philosophy
so-
channel.
so the okay Troyer. So there
Alright,
was
sure.
a question that I think there was this guy. He was a personal question. I can't find him. His name was something like Bobby Boy. He wanted to know how tall you are.
Kill me now.
I hate you so much.
How tall who is?
You. I mean,
what does that have?
well, that's what Bobby Boy wanted to know.
Yeah, Bobby Boy is just like he likes to know people's heights for some.
I'm between 1 and 2 meters high, so I'll give you that.
Okay. All right. Well, take care, James, and
No worries.
I hope it's a
I
velour.
hope
Yeah,
hope
closer
that,
to one.
I hope guys. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I did. And again, you're free to reuse this in any way you wish. I gave you the chat link to my version of the Kalam. You can use that. I think that's.
Oh yeah, I'll just leave that.
I'm gonna try to convince Canadian to delete the video.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
So James, they're just joking. So James, you're free to reuse it in any way, do anything, and thanks so much for coming and taking this opportunity to talk. I'll see you.
No worries. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks. I'll see you
Cool.
later.
See ya.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
And next time, James, let me know why the universe necessarily has to be life permitting. Okay.
Well,
Okay.